it was my idea. I kind of dragged Judy kicking and screaming a little bit at first, but it was lovely to work with poetry work. The first one was in college. Never thought I would do it again, but here we are.
And we are related.
We are related, yes.
Not everybody knows.
Yeah. So I'll do my own introduction first. I'm an intimacy coach and a life coach. I was formerly a chemist, and yes, COVID kind of changed all of that. So, also deeply dedicated to my own healing and intergenerational healing. And so this is Judith Brassard Brown, the artist who is displayed around us. Right. All of the work in the book is Judith's paintings. Right. Yep. And most of them are recent, but there are some that are less recent.
I was going to say, a percentage of them are from, as far back as 10 or 15 years.
Okay, and winging the introduction, professor at Montserrat College of Art and Northeastern. You have to let me try. Okay. A creator of the Boston Visual School, which brought countless students to Italy as a part of an art program, changing countless lives internationally, collected around the world. Yes, all that. And what am I missing?
Well, I've been in Boston and involved in cooperative galleries. I was first involved in Brownfield before being in commercial galleries for a long time, and then coming back to Kingston, which has been a real pleasure.
Fantastic. Yeah, and you used to
live across the street.
Yeah, in the building back in the
I used to live across the street when there was no heat on the weekends. People used to bring cars here to set them on fire.
Boy, how times have changed.
I know, and I think a lot of
the same.
Right, exactly. No, it was a very punk rock bands in the basement, right? It was hilarious, right? I used to paint with an electric blanket on, right? That's how we lived on it.
Sure.
You have a long cord so you can make your way around.
Okay, and then we also have Erick Maldonado. Did I get that right? Yes. Yeah. Fantastic. It's a lot of vowels. Erick is an emerging artist and fellow here at the Kingston Gallery, whose solo exhibition Delights Monument. Did I get that one?
Yeah.
Sorry, Delights Momentum. Thank you. Is displayed in the middle gallery. Erick is currently a graduate student at University of Connecticut, pursuing a master's degree in fine arts. Erick's work consists of conveying expressions of delight and joy in response to his environments using charcoal and a hybrid of materials. Yeah. So again, thank you all very much for coming. Okay, so we have a list of questions prepared, but we also are very much interested in the questions that you have. So I'm going to get started, but please don't be shy to interrupt and ask follow-up questions, unrelated questions. Everything's on the table. Fantastic. Okay, so my first question is, in what ways does the creation of art assist in the healing process?
Well, anytime you want to go in front of me.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just go over in what ways does art...
Yeah, in what ways does the creation of art assist in the healing process?
Well, I think the making of art is incredibly primal. It's just our nature to want to reflect our experience or process our experience. And I really, dreaming to me is kind of mental flossing, right? That's how we take care of ourselves. And I really see that that's what painting and the arts is. That whether you're into music or you're like visual art, like whatever it is that you're into, the making and the viewing of it is akin to like that whole experience of like your dreams, right? You get to go live in another place. You get to process things in a different way. You get to sort of like pull back and reflect and, all these things that would never exist together in real life, right? And there's nothing real about painting, let's be real. Right? It's just grit, like on a flat surface, and we create these worlds that you keep moving in and through. So I think that there's a lot of work. I really believe that there's a lot of healing that happens in arts, both in the making and the viewing.
think about times of like, if I wasn't making art, how unhinged that would be of me, or how reverse that process would be for me. And I think that if I wasn't in the space or capacity to kind of do what I do, I don't think I would be where I am today. Yeah.
Well, it's that, we're experiencing joy. Right?
Yeah. Exactly. And that's also why I called the show The Life Momentum. It was something that I was kind of contextualizing in my own process, in my own work. I was thinking about how I look at little parts of delight or little parts of joy that comes into my life, and I'm trying to recreate that experience again and re-show that through my work. And I think that's very beautiful.
Yeah, and I tend to think about this sort of neurological theory of the left brain being where all this like verbal and intellectual processing is, and the right brain being where all the visual and like nonverbal processing is. And some have described the right brain as this silent passenger, right? And so when we make art, when we make imagery, we give a voice to that silent passenger. We give a chance for that right brain, which lacks language, to speak. And then, the juxtaposition of adding that language to it is an interesting combination of sort of saying, okay, well, this is what's come up. So how does that feel? What does that mean? And processing, feeling feelings, I think, is an essential part of healing. So, okay, this is a great opportunity to interrupt for questions before I go on with my own. Okay, next question.
Give them some more.
1, 2, 3. So how does viewing art assist in the healing process? Or how could it?
For me, it just gets me out of myself, it's so important to me to have experiences where I can enter other worlds and I can see things from different perspectives. I think it's fabulous. I take from other artists different times and eras. They can seem so different than my own work, but they give you something. And we're in dialogue with them. We don't exist in a vacuum. We're, all of these fabulous influences. I got in trouble when I was in art school because they said, who do you want to, who you admire the most? Who do you want to paint like? And I said, I think I want to paint like Bette Midler sings. Well, that isn't weird. But I thought it was really a good analogy, and I stood up for it because, the way I saw it is I knew I wasn't going to be an opera singer, right? I knew what my range was. I knew how I wanted to connect with other people. And I was invested in being expressive in my body, from my experience, from my viewpoint. And I wasn't sure what that was going to look like, but it felt good to think about it that way.
And so for your recollection, the question was, how does viewing art assist in the healing process? So how would you answer that?
I think, automatically when you said that, I was thinking about my own process in terms of looking at other works of art and looking at what was historically happening during those times. Especially in terms of artists expressing themselves or, what the artist kind of was able to conjure in the time that there was, just trouble or anything that was bad happening to them. I think that's something that I feel is part of my healing process in terms of kind of getting out of my own body, Judith just said, and out of that space and thinking about how can I reflect on this, or how can I put myself in this position that would get me into, my own traumas or my own processes that are kind of troubling me right now.
Yeah.
Or something.
And I think about what you said. What would be happening if I wasn't making art?
Yeah.
This has been a strategy right along to be able to take the time and space, to be able to make hopefully beautiful things out of what can be often very difficult, and to create that moment where you can, take it back, right? You can say, wow, this is a funny, funky moment, but it's gorgeous. You can only just take the time to see it, the way these things put together.
Yeah, for me, I think like it gives us a permission, right? So much in our culture, we have this attitude of like, don't have feelings, don't go through shit. If you do, hide it. And you don't necessarily have an opportunity to like experience that fully. And I think with the viewing of art, it gives us permission to feel these feelings that are really difficult, right? Or feel these feelings that are complex. And additionally, it gives us like an opportunity to develop language, right? Where we may not have had, an opportunity to experience that development of language. Here now there's all this language around describing the artwork, describing the sensation you experience in the artwork, and I think that's very much akin to those, deeply processing those feelings and really getting into the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah, I think it's great that you write poetry because you were around visual people all the time, and you do paint, but you seem to be able to get it through words, which I don't.
Yeah, no, I never can paint what I'm thinking, so, but I can write what I'm thinking. So. But, okay, next question is sort of related. What can the artist do specifically to give permission to the viewer to process challenging feelings?
I had a weird response. My initial response to that was like, am I responsible for that person's healing process? And I'm not necessarily sure if that is my responsibility, but I also feel, I think the only thing I'm responsible is for making it work. And I think that's solely what that is about in terms of that other person's healing process. Because I don't know if that's going to be something that's healing for them. You never know if 1 minute someone's going to like the work that you do, and then 5 to 10 years later you get canceled and you're like, nobody likes your work anymore because they think, you're just pretentious or some sort of egotistic artist. But I think the only responsibility I have is just making it work and allowing it that way to just be viewed.
Yeah.
I don't think anything outside of that is, responsible.
Sure.
No, I think that's it. You're dedicated to creating the conditions for certain things to happen, right? Like it's healing for me, and I think for most artists, but I think it creates the conditions that other people can have these meditative spaces without judgment, right? Like it can be very private. The thing I love about visual art is, right, like you do it one at a time, right? Like right? It's not like a group thing. It's like very individual. So you can take the time to go or to visit or to see or revisit. And when even sort of like have a different dialogue with artwork later on. Which is kind of interesting. I used to struggle with the whole thing is that are you responsible for what they see or how they feel? And that's absolutely,
that's
you can't, not only that, but early on I had an experience where somebody came to me at a show and was so grateful for this painting and then went on this rant about how she hated these people too. I was like, oh my God. Like, wow. And I'm not usually at a loss for words, but I was at that time,
Yeah. Well, and I think you spoke about responsibility, and I tend to sort of lean into opportunity. So instead of saying like, what do you have to do? I'm sort of more concerned with what do we have the opportunity to do, right? And so one of the things I think that was really wonderful in the book is that we got to go through some really messy emotions on the way to healing, right? And like, here is an opportunity to practice rage. Here's an opportunity to be validated if you have rage, if you have sadness, if you have depression. And I think that the construction of a gallery exhibit is like it's a curated experience, right? I mean, you come in and there's a flow to it, and this is literally a space where you can have feelings, right? And then there are these works that create these emotional responses, and putting a stool in the center of the space and say, look, you have permission to sit, right? Not to say that you have the responsibility to provide that stool, but when you do provide that stool, you give them permission to sit. And I think in the same way, on a much more subtle level, when we evoke emotions with artworks, we give permission to people to have those emotions, right? In a world where we often are never given those permissions, right? Where we say it's like, it's unattractive to be, if you have complicated emotions, you should hide them, you should have them on your own. Yeah.
So you said something that I'm curious about. You talked about, I think you were talking about the process of putting the book together, and that you went through certain emotions, sound like together, working through things, I'm not sure. But what was that like? How did you choose, I haven't had time to really study it. Is there a flow to it that goes from a place to another place?
Yeah.
And you worked on that together, and just tell me a little bit about your process.
It was really his idea.
Yeah. We really had a chance to do a lot of work independently, right?
You had your poems.
Yeah, well, Judy's got a body of work that's, decades in the making, and I got to look through that and to sort of say what pairs with these emotions. And I used the Kubler-Ross model for grieving as a framework for the healing process, right? Because essentially, letting go, processing feelings and letting go is kind of a grieving process. And so I think it's shock and denial, anger and bargaining, depression, reconstruction, working through, and hope and acceptance are the name of the chapters. And so there's this curvature of downward and back up that there's flaws to the Kubler-Ross model. It's not the only thing that exists, and it's certainly not perfect. But I saw it as a framework to loosely use as a roadmap to sort of say, okay, what comes up when I think of these intergenerational challenges, these personal challenges in these different phases. And I had the luxury of taking the work and writing for the work, right? I think, Judy has gone through so much with her work that it's all there. And so, finding depression pieces is not hard. Finding happy pieces is not hard. Finding hope and acceptance is not hard. They're all there, And there was a lot of discussion about pairing and repairing and swapping around. And so it really we worked more together in the editing process than in the creation process, right? We sort of independently created. I sort of put the skeleton together and said, okay, we need more, we need more hope and acceptance pieces, or we need more reconstruction. There was actually one piece that was it was retitled because it was a reconstruction piece, but it was titled Before the Storm, and I was like, oh shit, this should be after the storm. And she's like, yeah, just fine, just change it. Awesome. Because you can't tell. It's
that crazy light.
It's the third piece for me, right? And that light where that it's the light amidst the storm. Is it the beginning or is it the end? And you can't really tell, and we kind of swapped it. So, I was really lucky to have somebody who would work with me like that, and not just be hard-nosed and.
But we all have our personal stories. We're mother and son, so there's stuff that he has to process that's very difficult because of where I was and what I could see at the time. And it'd be nice to think that you could heal all of the elements that would make you be this perfect parent or perfect teacher. But to me, the artist and the parent, whatever the responsibility is, really to try and not play it forward, the generational trauma. For me to be present and ethical with my students, to live, that kind of living by example. you know, I mean, you make mistakes, but you can own them,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to hide them or, you know, shove them on somebody else. And there's so much of that that goes on in the world, right? That this is that process that you want to sort of put out there in the world, so that it's far more than just a picture on the wall. It's, right? I mean, it's what we do all the time. We always talk about like the process, you know, because it's that process that we model.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier how Judith kind of just gave you some of the framework to kind of create these poems. So would you say you guys were kind of giving each other scores or like recipes to kind of develop the work and process it together?
No, I was kind of left to my own devices. She was kind of like, I think what was really powerful was that she had a lot of faith in my ability. I think at the beginning there wasn't a shared vision.
Yeah.
I sort of was like, hey, what if we did this? And she was like, I mean, sure, I guess. It was kind of the attitude I started. And I don't blame her because I can't, we're not telepathic, I can't like inject my vision. But as it started to build flesh and bones, then it was like, oh, okay, yeah, well, let's do this instead, and let's do that, and what if we did this, and you know. So I think that there was, I don't want to say there wasn't any, you know, creative contribution in the process. There absolutely was, but it wasn't at the beginning. At the beginning, I had to sort of come together with a rough draft, so that we could really understand what was the process.
Right. In terms of a book, it's a writing project, right?
Yeah.
Which is different. I mean, for visual artists, we like having it like right there.
Yeah.
Like there can be layers and rhythms, and right, but it's like you see the entire thing, right?
Yeah.
When you look upon it, I mean, for a written piece, like there were all those pages and keeping that thread and being able to make those connections, and it's a different kind of.
It's almost like you can't like hang the gallery space before you see it.
Yeah.
And so I had to construct the gallery space, which was the book.
Yeah.
And then you had to read it.
Yes.
I saw a question in the back.
I just thought I think it's really interesting that it's not like a call and response project, but it's more of a inter-responding kind of thing. That the way you just explained it, like having the poetry and then thinking about how the work can respond to the poetry and how the poetry can talk to the work, right? At least that's what I'm hearing. And I just really love that, because so often when people collaborate on a project like this, it's more of a call and response, and working at the same time to do it. But I was really intrigued, Ezra, when you said, you know, like, there's decades of work here, and I'm like, oh, but, you know, that's really interesting. So I guess I don't really have a question, I'm just like reaffirming that I'm hearing what you were doing.
Yeah, no, and compared to the body of work that Judy provided, mine was like a shot out of a gun, right? It was an instant. And a lot of the work was, I would see a painting and say, okay, I want to write to this painting. And then a lot of times I wrote what I felt like I needed to be written, and then it was like, okay, now we need to find a painting for this, right? I mean, there's actually one painting which was written one poem that was written specifically to a poem, and then we swapped the painting out. So it's sort of a ghost in my mind, but
I think the only one that you ever wrote really specifically for the painting, and didn't morph, was Lapel Weed.
oh sure, but that's the one that stayed. Yeah, that one was very much.
Which is this one of the two trees sort of like.
And I think that's in depression, because it's kind of the, you know, kill yourself vibe.
Third.
Yeah, so the closest to me.
It's a great painting.
Yeah, and I didn't explain that the title. The title is French for the call of the void. So if you've ever been like close to a ledge and you find yourself fantasizing about jumping off the ledge, even if you don't have any suicidal tendencies, that's called Lapel de Vie. That's the call of the void. And neurologists say that is a way to keep us from falling, because we fantasize and we know how bad it can be. So we don't do it.
Right. So that's really,
We had another question, I think.
Yeah, I was just, an amazing project, and I just quickly read through the book, and I had seen the show before. I'm wondering about referring to some of your questions before we got to this point, about sort of intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, Judy, how you feel about, because you didn't set out to paint these to accompany
no,
future writing.
no, but they're always about so much.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And part of what they're about is what your son is picking up on and
That's right.
expanding upon.
Yeah, I mean, we write artist statements,
Right.
right? We talk about our work all the time. I'm really good at being vague. I think anybody who knows me well will say I'm really very practiced to be, because the work is always about so much, and it can sort of like coexist on so many different levels to sort of like give a narrative or an arch is very difficult for me. But the irony is that you
Very little.
very well, but also saw it all, right? And the
Right.
difficulty, and one of the reasons that I was so excited about this, and I think it's, you know, like your beginning of it is this, like this ability to sort of like sit with the work and really see what it is all about and where it is sort of connecting on a lot of different levels. And then one of the primary things, so, you know, like that matching up with the poem is like these things were really more about, you know, stressful struggle, where, you know, joy is more present, right? And, you know,
Right, speaking of which, you have many
Yeah.
paintings that are full
That
filled
feel
with
joy.
joy
Yeah.
and beauty.
yeah, and that's the thing, if you let, I mean, because, you know, anything can torpedo us at any given time. And that's what I love about, like, your work, is this, your, like, the really simple, like, everyday kind of moments, and that they're transformed,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And there's humor, and there's delight, and
Yeah.
there's, you know, like a playfulness, and it's like those moments can just skitter away without any acknowledgement, right?
Without being
But
crystallized.
and
Yeah.
those are the things that sustain us.
Yeah.
Those are the things, you know, I mean, these days, like, I can't watch television, I can't watch, you know, I mean, it's like, there's so many ways we're all being traumatized, even without, like, direct physical, you know,
Bombardment.
trauma, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, or, that we can't lose sight of that. And if we lose sight of that, we lose, like, the essence of, like, our humanity, right? Like, and that is, like, tragic, right? So, so I just want to know, I mean, it just, I had a hard time, like seeing it work out.
Yeah.
Because I have a hard time finding my way out of that fog.
Yeah, I mean, I think it poses back to the question, like, how responsible are you for the viewer? And like, at this point, you're the viewer, and you felt compelled to find your own healing through the work.
Yeah.
And a result of that came out the book and came out this poetry and this writing. So that's really beautiful.
Well, and I also want to call out like two more subtle layers. Like one is that there's an audiobook where I describe the artwork, and I have my interpretation of the artwork. And I was like, I insist, look at my script before I do it, because maybe I'm wrong. And there was a couple times where my interpretation of the painting was so significantly different from your interpretation of the painting that I had to like change tacks. Where I was like, oh, here's this lovely little dunes, and you're like, actually, you're fucking trapped at the bottom of this sandy hill. You can't go anywhere. You know, and then there was also this, Judith talked about these impressions that we make, on our children and on people as a result of our trauma. You know, we almost get this like negative relief of the trauma. So like, okay, I've got the trauma, but it's not the same as yours. But there were some ways that working on this book was really healing. right? There were some ways where, you know, I got to learn more about what was traumatic about your experiences, or share ways that I was, you know, traumatized, and also like the path out we got to share, and something that was really beautiful. And I didn't set out to say like, here's this project that's going to be really healing. I was like, hey, maybe we can do a thing. You know, I didn't really understand the depth that was going to come about from that experience, but I'm really grateful for that depth that now that I've discovered it. So,
and I guess there is a kind of missionary aspect, I think, to artists. Let's be real, you know? Like, we want to make things better, right? Like, there's that, and it's really encouraging people to do their own work, right? To believe in themselves, to take the time, right? To have, like, these more, like, personal experiences that are good for you, right? You know, that are private, good for you, like help you see more, right? To do that work, right? And it's, I don't think people always get a lot of encouragement to do the work, and it's not easy, and maybe some people can't, right?
yeah, as long as you're making a fat bag, you know, you're getting approval of the society. Be fucked up, you know. I think I was in sales, and that, you know, that happens a lot, where like people will come in with these really significant issues, and they say, "But don't fix that. That's driving you. Use it."
Yeah.
You know, and that's really tragic that our society doesn't necessarily value healing as much as it does succeeding.
Right.
Right.
Right, but the arts, right, like that's why we make art, right? I think that it's transformative. Like everybody's like, oh, it's true. But it is. It's, you know, transforms the maker, it transforms the viewer. I mean, I go see people's shows, and it's just like that's a joyous thing. When I get to like sit in the space, and Louis here has the show in the back, is absolutely gorgeous, and really is about sort of taking the time and the space again, like from a different angle, right? And how we give each other. You know, like these gifts, right? But it's that's you know, and I'm a teacher, right? So I don't know.
It means that she could talk forever.
No, I'm just saying. I think, you know, that the responsibility is to make it better as you play it forward, not to create damage.
Yeah.
Right? And if you do damage, then you try to look it straight in the face and, you know, try to make amends.
Yeah.
That you always can, but.
So I have another question for Eric. So how do you feel when somebody is viewing your work and interprets it very differently than what you intended? Like, how do you feel in that moment?
Good question, thank you. I feel in the moment if someone misinterprets my work and kind of drives their own narrative about it, I think what I tend to do is kind of, I don't necessarily try to correct people in their own interpretation. I feel, you know, if somebody believes that, you know, I you know, want to go ahead and respect that, but I also think that if someone, you know, reinterprets my work that way, I try to be open and understanding of that situation or of that person and what they have to say about my work. I think what matters most is how I feel about it and what narrative I'm pushing through and what I'm trying to say and what's visually being depicted, versus, you know, with somebody else is like, okay, well, this is what this work is about, and this is what, you know, I'm contextualizing, you know, this, and it feels like it's this. You know, I don't try to steer them away from that. I try to kind of be open and understanding, and I'm like, maybe I'll think about that later. I have to like sit with it for a few days, because I'm like, I didn't think that was something that was possible out of my work, or I didn't think that would be a situation that would happen, or, you know. Yeah.
But you hold that and you consider it and look at your work through that perspective as well.
I try to put it through that lens, and try to see what that work has to say through that viewer, but I don't think I would necessarily hold it to a standard or say that is like the reinterpretation of what I have to make. yeah, I think it's dangerous when you kind of play with that a little bit.
Mhm.
Try to reinterpret everything everyone says about your work.
Right.
It feels like you don't want to kind of have it stain your creativity or
Right.
have it stain your process either.
Right.
Because that very easily could happen, right? You could just switch and move a whole different direction from where you are.
It's almost like critique, right?
Yeah.
Like you can, talk to people and critique one another's work, and sometimes you kind of reject what everybody says, right?
Yeah.
It's very different. But if you open up to it, like Eric's saying, then you can see what it has for you. But you're right.
Yeah.
You take what
You can't.
feels right to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, my first thought was to mess with you. You're going to consider every point of view. I'm about to get weird.
No. Yeah.
That is dangerous, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a bug in
Yeah.
the ear. So. Okay, so I have two lead-up questions to one really heavy question. And the way that you were just talking, what makes me want to just go right into the heavy question. But yeah, let's lead up. Let's be gentle. What does holding space mean to you?
Say it again?
Holding space. What does holding space mean to you? Why don't you start?
Patience. I was thinking of that question on the spot, and I immediately thought patience is holding space. I think having, patience for somebody else, capacity to allow the person to be how they be, or just, I think that's the simple word answer to that, patience. I can't really bring up a situation where that would be what holding space is like, but
Mhm.
I just,
Sure.
I would say it's very much patience, and also recognizing that we have no control, right? That you can't try to control the situation or right? You holding space means you accept your boundaries,
Mhm.
right? And you give other people that room,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Without trying to pressure or manipulate or judge or,
Mhm.
just holding space,
Yeah. To me, I think it means acceptance of the situation where
Right.
if somebody's having a hard time, you don't make it about you.
Right.
You just sort of say, okay, this is the hard time we're having. How can I be supportive? How can I engage in a way that doesn't disrupt their process? How about healing? What does healing mean to you?
A never-ending story.
Never-ending story. Okay.
No, so you go. I'll go out. What it is.
I think healing is, I think going back to that last question, acceptance of oneself, and where you are in that moment. I also think of healing as something that's kind of shedding. You're not necessarily going towards perfectionism or going towards the ultimate, sense of self. I think, it's just a continuous, gradual process.
Sure. I think I spend a lot of time thinking about healing, and for me, I think healing is letting go. Healing is allowing an experience to pass through you without holding on to it, without pushing it away. Just letting go, right? Letting it, again, acceptance, but almost acceptance in a transient space of it's here for this moment. It won't be here in this next moment, so I don't need to push it away. I don't need to hold on to it because it'll be back. I just let it go. Yeah, let it go.
It's kind of a shame. Daniela Thomas is going to be the therapist on the panel.
Yeah. And she
I
got
worked with
COVID.
her. She got COVID.
Yeah, very good
Oh,
excuse.
it's really a
Very
bummer.
good excuse. She's keeping
No,
us
it's
healthy.
really sad.
Yeah.
I worked with Danielle when she was a student at Montserrat College of Art, and after being an artist for a long time, she went back and now she's a licensed therapist. And she would have brought that point of view, but I think that we're part of a community, and that's one area where like you know, you're with your family and your friends.
Mhm.
But if, like, I know for myself, I'm aware of things that like need to be untangled and reconfigured. Like there are therapies, like this EMDR therapy wasn't available like years ago, right? So
Yeah.
I went back into therapy to do this EMDR, and it's like unbelievably amazing, right? And like sharing like stories, like I work out a lot of things in my picture, but to really completely untangle them, sometimes we need help, right? And again, it's like another way where I really want to like put it out there, to like help people, you know, seize that moment, right? To do what's right so that they can take care of themselves. And if you take care of yourself, you ultimately take care of other people.
Mhm.
You know, I used to be a life guy, and I, you know, like a swimming instructor. You don't save anybody, right? If you're gonna drown first.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, and it's that like you really have to like be aware that that's one of the ways that you can be like really responsible. And it also makes its way into the art form, right?
Yeah.
Because you're able to untangle things.
Yeah.
Well, and to be
It's still a metaphor.
and to be quite literal, right? I mean, there is physical healing of a physical injury, and then there's spiritual healing, right? If we're talking about emotional healing, we're really talking about spiritual healing. And I think that you know, our ancestors live within us, our future children live within us, you know, our community lives within us. When we heal ourselves, we have more of an ability to make space for those around us and to support their healing as well.
It's kind of like if you're a parent on an airplane with your child, right?
Yeah.
You need to put on your mask.
That's right.
Care for the child.
Yeah. Okay, so ready for the doozy?
I thought that was
No, that wasn't the doozy. That was the lead up. That was the lead up. So, you know, to what degree are we, each of us, responsible for repairing intergenerational trauma? Yeah, suck the air right out of the room.
Well, I mean, there's always some of them that's going on. I mean, really, because there's just so much damage from one generation to another, societally, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think every child vows to themselves that they will do a better job. And I would never do that.
Some people aren't traumatized. I know that, but
No, I know some people are.
I met one once.
You met one once? I thought there was one. No, but I think that's a driving force, and if you're aware of that, that's sort of like part of how you sort of, I think it's important to do what you can, you know, and I think there are a lot of ways that, you know, trauma builds on trauma. You know, it says like there's 3 generations to make like an unholy mess of, right?
Yeah,
You know? I mean, there are just like different ways that you can think about it and process it. And I think, and I would hope, like, especially in these bizarre times that we're living in, that, you know, like all of us, certainly in this room, are really doing whatever we can, right?
Yeah.
To try and untangle that and make things better as it moves forward.
Yeah, I try to think about like intergenerational progress and intergenerational instead of like intergenerational trauma. I think about the things that I am doing now in terms of how I'm living my life that's actually helping
Right.
not like think about the trauma or think about what's, you know, kind of constantly happening within the family dynamic.
Sure.
I think about things, you know, I am probably my great-grandfather's great-great-great-grandfather's, like, you know, living dream or something of that sort, you know. You know, everything that I'm going through right now, even the progress that I'm probably making throughout my life is something that they probably hoped for or wished for,
Absolutely.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about, you know, if I were to have children one day, or if, you know, I think about maybe my own nieces and my nephews, like, how am I paving way for them to live in a better world or live in a better environment than I am right now in this moment. So I think that's a constant, like, what about the future is going to be accessible and allowed that it wasn't accessible and allowed when I was growing up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. I didn't mean for this question to be an indictment.
Yeah.
I mean, it can sort of feel that way, but there was a poem, Debt, where there was one vantage point, sort of on the other side of healing, where feeling like these things that have come from previous generations are the debt that I now am obligated to pay. And so I think it can feel very heavy, and I think it can feel like you have to. And I don't think anybody has to, right? But I also think that the process of healing is to develop a set of tools, and those are the exact same tools that we can use to heal our great-grandparents or our great-grandchildren. And so I think that there is this opportunity that when you get to a certain, it's almost like eating, and you've got this like, oh, there's this mountain of food in front of me, and I will never get through it, but then you get really good at it, and it's gone, and maybe you still have an appetite. And so I think if you have the appetite, keep eating, because it's never gone. It just becomes other people's. It just becomes your ancestors and your descendants' trauma that you are processing on that spiritual level. And I think I am hungry. I think that
To heal.
Yeah. Well, I think I've done a lot of healing, and I feel like sometimes I wake up hungry to heal, and there's not that much healing to do. And so I keep space for those that I don't know. I keep space to like heal spiritually those that maybe I'll never even meet. But I think that that's really valuable, and that there's this sort of ethereal healing that can happen. And I mean, you look at the world, there's never-ending sources of trauma. There's always a plate full of shit sandwich to eat if you're hungry. So.
I know. That's cheery.
Yeah. That's the end of my questions. Are there any other questions people have
about the work
specifically, the book?
Or even lose, I'd drag you in with this,
I've got a question, but I'll ask you privately. Yeah. I appreciate your questions, though. Yeah, any other questions, concerns, comments? Happy to address. We've got an extra 5 minutes.
Oh my God.
Right on time, I think. Yeah.
That's for Eric. We were looking at this the other night, your pieces. What was your inspiration behind the whole collection?
I just recently moved to Hartford, Connecticut, and I was basically kind of in a limbo in terms of where I was back in January of this year. But the collection came from finding my own home and kind of coming back to myself. I'm from Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is like north of Boston. It's not too far from here, but it has a very large Dominican demographic. So it's just a very urban city where there's always music being played around, and Spanish music. There's always salsa, merengue, bachata, just like happening. So I remember I just had like this moment where I entered a barbershop and I was like, I'm back here. I'm back where I was, and I hadn't felt that in a very long time. So that was where that collection came from. It also came from just a multitude of experiences in the barbershop as well. I was thinking about community and trying to find community, especially after you just moved. I was thinking about creating the work again was also a very healing process for me. Just coming back to the fact that, this is another third space, or somewhat of a third space. I'm here and there's a multitude of identities that are happening or just being experienced here. And I thought about it like on the barbershop, you sit in a chair and you're transforming your life, but you're also hearing the conversations about what's happening around the community. You're making choices about what type of person you want to look like or what you want to look like. And you're also having a conversation with somebody who you fully trust who's touching you in a very intimate way.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, it's
Very odd.
very odd. So I was thinking about that multitude and the layering of those experiences, and that kind of pushes that collection through. So thank you.
I'm glad you asked that question because I was really thinking about how that work relates to this work, besides on that more, I would say, theoretical or something, abstract way about the joy. And one possibility from what you were just saying is that these are the places that are a home
Yeah.
for us, and that they're different kinds of homes,
Yeah.
and different kinds of, I don't know. I always try to make connections between everything. I can sort of do it with Lewis too, but you know, it's, I appreciate what you just said.
Thank you.
Are those barber shops, particular barber shops and places?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
A lot of this was like my own reference in terms of like photograph and online, and I was thinking about just like Dominican barber shops, and I was thinking about the Latino community in particular when I'm entering these spaces, and just thinking about that experience of just like sitting down, just being there for that very short amount of time, and then coming back and being like, I feel good, I look good, but I also had a very good conversation with this particular person, and yeah, I don't know, that's sort of where all that kind of came from.
And are the numbers styles of hairstyles? Is that what
Yeah, some of them are reversed because I was thinking about like the idea of choice, and
who I want
that
to look like.
ideology of like, I'm making a choice here and it's gonna be reflected back to me in that way. Like, I want this hairstyle, but that hairstyle is soon to be what I'm gonna look like, or what I'm gonna soon to have. Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
You know, you're sitting there and the world happens around you.
Yeah. And yeah.
Well, and you reminded me of a really interesting point of, this is my second book, and the first book did really well because it was very well nested within the community that the book belonged. And this book is still feeling kind of orphaned because I don't feel nested within like the healing community or the art community. And so like, where is that place where this book will really speak to people? So I feel like I've got this indictment that where I really need to find that community, and the book is the nucleus to that community. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's worse because it just moved, right?
However,
Yeah.
if your book touches even one person,
It's
really
there.
changes one person,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that could be more worthwhile.
No,
than
that's
the
very
big
gratifying.
thing.
Sure.
No, and one of the things that I found like so kind of surprising is it was a pre-sale, you know, like the book has gotten out there. I mean, you know, a surprising number of books have been printed. The way that people reach out to me and talk about how it was so personally meaningful to them,
Yeah.
you know, and is soothing, is a gift, you know, that's lovely.
It's huge.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
And that's like easily accessible, right? You know, like when you're making paintings, like one of the things that makes me like sad, like a lot of people who would want to have the paintings, right? Like it's out of their reach, although we trade. You know, like there are ways to do.
And
so
now
like,
for just $24.95.
No, but you know what I'm saying. It's just kind of a funny, but it's something that that's why books were always so personally meaningful to me. You know, is when you have a book that like sort of connects to you that way. It's a resource and a sense of solace. You know, so you know that to me is pretty cool. So I'm really glad.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, round of applause for our panelists. Round of applause for me.